And hello good people of the internet, it is I, Tommy Kelly. This is Adventures in Woo Woo. Back out in nature, we're beside a stream. This is about the 10th time I've tried to record this video. And I keep stopping because I keep making mistakes, or I go, that's not what I wanted to say, blah. Anyway, this week what I wanted to do was go back to a couple of questions I got last week from the question and answer, the monthly question and answer that we do here on the channel. And the reason why I didn't answer them within that question and answer is I want to spend a bit more time just on the topics at hand, rather than just throwing them in with a number of other questions that were unrelated. So the three questions were mostly around awakening in some sense. The first one from Mark was more about the HGA, which is the Holy Guardian Angel, and specifically about the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, which is, I suppose, a thing that happens that particularly well known within Thelemic or Thelemic. I can never know which way to pronounce it. I've heard both circles where you find out about your Holy Guardian Angel and you converse with it. And it's like one of the stages along the way to, let's say, awakening or enlightenment, becoming a god, whatever you want to do, or union. The second question was from Abraxas, and it was about the idea of that, is there too much emphasis in one sense put on this whole kind of drive towards awakening, or people getting lost within the kind of sphere of trying to awaken and forgetting the actual practical hard work thing of spirituality, where, you know, the kind of, there's this notion, I suppose, of that the jhanas and the vijanas, which I suppose the greater enlightenment, you have the whole kit and caboodle, yeah, but what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do with it? What's the usefulness with it? And I suppose that brings in the whole idea of the bodhisattvas and stuff like that. Max then, I was going to say interjected, but he didn't. He just kind of replied to the comment saying that being a person who's read an awful lot about awakening, but wouldn't consider himself to have had an awakening experience, he's kind of come across the idea that awakening, or the lust, I suppose, for awakening, or the drive towards awakening is a misapprehension that kind of falls away at some point. So I wanted to talk a bit about my whole experience of awakenings, and what I think they are and what's the usefulness about them. The whole thing with awakening, or enlightenment, I prefer the word awakening. I'll tell you why in a minute. Where there's a whole side of things where people say you shouldn't talk about your experiences, because in one sense that's kind of, I suppose, showing off. It's elitism, it's creating a hierarchy between those who are awakened and those who aren't. There's kind of a, you know, it's seen as kind of bad manners, bad form, egotistical. And an awful lot of the kind of schools or the kind of theories or the approaches to that would say never to talk about your awakening experiences. I understand that I completely agree in many ways that can all happen. It can become an egotistical experience, and it can become a hierarchical, in a bad way, where you have two sets of people. Or even worse, you've non-awakened, awakened, and supremely awakened type people. But then also that, because this is the thing that happens, and if you make it a secret and you don't talk about it, when these experiences happen to people, they've nowhere to go, they've nowhere to discuss it, because they'll go, oh, I don't know anything about this. And there's this kind of fake dishonesty, a disingenuousness about the whole thing. It's kind of saying, well, I've had these experiences, but I'm not talking about them. And there's kind of, it can be a kind of an underhanded bragging that goes on with that well, no one who is awakened pointing, you know, secretly to themselves would suggest that they are awakened, and this all kind of stuff. So I think there's 2 points to be made about that, where don't talk about it, but also, you know, leave trails, leave clues, help people out, you know, and let's not pretend these isn't a thing that happens. Let's not pretend that these aren't experiences that are happening. And let's not maybe put them on such a pedestal that it becomes this kind of unholy goal that we all have to, this, you know, holy grail type thing, which is in a certain sense happening. Where would I put myself on the kind of scale of things? I suppose I'd never say I'm awakened. I'd say I've had awakening experiences. I've been quite opening about and talked about my awakening experiences, but I've no way would claim enlightenment, mastership, or in any kind of way have some sort of hierarchical thing where I'm awakened and you're not, because it's definitely, it doesn't feel like that. I would situate, I'll explain it in this way. In hanging around an awful lot with Fairsley, with Christopher Wallace, Harish, and he's a kind of tantric outlook on things, Shiva Tantrism. And within that he talks about that the whole notion of awakening was that it wasn't that you suddenly got all the knowledge of the world and you were one with the universe, or that you know, every detail was clear to you. It was that you were no longer able to go back to sleep. That you had an experience, or you had an insight, or you had something which no longer made it possible for you to go back to sleep, to believe the glamour of the world, the illusion of the world, or other unhelpful terms like that, but that it was something had shifted in you and you couldn't ever go back to sleep. Not that anything fundamental changed about the world or creation, but just that your shifting had kind of happened. It's similar to Gordon White's notion of becoming invincible, which he talks about in Chaos Protocols, or it's like steam entry in the Buddhist type thing. It's that first thing that happens, that is your first glimpse of God or divinity or whatever words you want to use, of non-materialism alone. That means you can't go back. And in a sense, the HGA is an experience of that. The glimpse of the angel at the beginning is kind of letting you know that these things are going on. So that could be argued as the first, or the actual knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel could equally be seen as steam entry. My apologies to Marco for in advance. So I would say that yes, I have had experiences that I cannot go back to sleep on, and therefore in that sense I'm awake. And I want to explain it to you through the use of a parable. I'll do my best Jesus impression. But it's more an analogy, so it's not a Jesus impression. Say you are happily married, and you've been happily married to this woman, say, just for the sake of argument, for the last 20 years. As far as you're concerned, you can see you have a great life, you've bought a house together, you know, everything is going great. And then one day, you discover that for the last 10 years, she's been sleeping with your brother. And your whole life falls apart. Now, the interesting thing with that is that you can't unsee that, or you can't go back. You've awakened to the truth of that. So you can't go back to sleep on it. You can pretend, you can kind of suppress it, you can act like it hasn't happened, but you can never not know that knowledge. And fundamentally, nothing has changed in the world, but your entire life has changed. Your past has changed, your relationship with all your friends have changed who knew about it or didn't know about it, your relationship with your brother has changed, your relationship with your wife has changed, but nothing actually has changed about what was going on in the world at all. It's just that your awareness of it. It's like you've seen the man behind the curtain, and now you can't unsee that the Wizard of Oz is in fact, you know, just a human like the rest of us. So that's in a sense what I mean by awakening, in that you can't no longer go back to sleep on something. You're no longer able to, I suppose, pretend it isn't the truth. Well, yes, you can pretend, but you're no longer able to do it. You get what I'm saying, you get what I drift. So, becoming invincible, steam entry, that I would say, yes, that's something that I have experienced. I think after that, awakening becomes kind of like, I don't think it's as clear-cut and stages as people like to suggest. I think they're helpful maps, but as we all know, maps not the territory, the meal is not the menu. And if you look at certain different experiences that I've had or other people have had, some of it comes from this, you know, depending on the map you're using, some of it comes there. So, you know, in that stage, some of it's a bit from here. And I think once I kind of started looking at it that way and kind of uncovering the different kind of insights that I were having, the map thing kind of fell away. It may come back, but it seemed more the map thing about collecting badges, collecting accolades, and putting yourself within a hierarchy, at least to me, in the bad sense of putting yourself in the hierarchy of specialness, putting yourself in a special place, rather than just in where you are. So then going to, so with the HGA experience, that's what I would say, Mark, that's what it feels like to me, that it's a first, it's the steam entry, becoming invincible, all of that, along with the other experience I had, particularly that one in the forest where my damaged self from my darkness and my unadulterated self appeared, and it was a wonderful experience. I talked about it, and I literally made the video just down there all about it actually. That was a huge catalyst coming out from the therapy that I had done, an awful lot of work I had done on myself. That one I also talked about where I was in a monastery and I was in the garden, and it suddenly dawned on me that I was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and I was also, which meant it was the place of ultimate betrayal, the place where you had to stand up for yourself, where where the rubber met the road, where this was actually happening, you know. All of this is built, so it was the place of ultimate betrayal. This where Judas kisses Jesus. But I also noticed that every tree was the tree under which the Buddha gained enlightenment. So it was like the nature of this place is both ultimate betrayal, but also ultimate enlightenment. And while that's a dualistic kind of view, it's not. It's more like a polarity than two separate things. Then of course we had the experience where some form of divinity, or my own brain, whichever you want to look at it, came and had a chat with me and explained about the nature of things and how the role was, in relation to divinity in me is like a father-son relationship, and that the truth is kind of, while it's true for what it is an ultimate truth, and it'll always be a more ultimate truth. If you want to know more about them, I have done them on the podcast and I have talked about them on the blog. But any more reason to bring them up to say, all of that kind of resulted in me awakening in the sense of I can't go back to sleep. I've crossed a threshold of experience and insight that I can't subsequently suppress or ignore. And it has changed. I keep going to say change fundamentally how I view the world. It hasn't changed how the world has not changed in any way. My orientation to it has. But then going on to Abraxas' thing that says, right, though, grand, cool, well done. But is that the goal? And in one sense, I do feel it is the goal, but it's like the goal, it's the first goal. It's like the starting point. It's where the work actually begins. And then where Max is kind of saying the misapprehension of the striving towards awakening. It's definitely it's a problem, and I had it, and I think it's a problem that a lot of people I interact with have. That it's the striving that is stopping you from having it, and it was the directionality of where awakening seems to appear. I felt was there, and it's not. It's here. It's allowing it. It's not in finding it. And I think this striving, this lustful result towards awakening is going in the opposite direction, where you already have it. Which I understand would not have been helpful had someone said that a year ago, but it's also the kind of truth. So I would say, I'll do my Jesus impression again, give another analogy. I wish there were parables. I talk about seeds and trees and give out about fig trees. But this analogy only works pre-internet, because everything has changed since then. But say you were in a band and all your goals and all your kind of energy and all that was towards getting signed, getting a record contract, and this was all where it was going towards. And once you get that, that's it, you'd made it. And most bands never get signed. 99.999% of bands didn't get signed and didn't make it. But those who did and got the record contract realised in getting the record contract that was the start of it. They hadn't made it. Now the actual work begins. And that, to me, in a sense, is kind of what it feels like the awakening thing is, that while there's this big strive towards it, it's just a starting point. But that's not to say to discount it either, because there's something in it that, having accepted it, or whatever is the correct word, that grasping, that kind of needing, longing, yearning for, or frustration is gone and it's just disappeared. And that's definitely helpful. That's extremely helpful, because it was taking an awful lot of my energy and time, and making my life very unpleasant, and kind of thinking I was missing out, or that why isn't it happening to me? And this kind of frustration, anger, contraction. It's a contraction. Of course, awakening, or whatever the word we want to use for it, is the opposite of that. And so, to go back to the kind of the overall thing, I suppose, and what Abraxas was talking about, I think it is kind of worth pursuing, because I think that you become more useful, in a sense, to yourself and the universe and creation when you have more knowledge of who you are, what your situation is, your place in the world, or whatever these things are. But I don't think it's like it's not the goal, and people seem to have put it up on a pedestal. That's the thing. Once I have that, once I'm awake, then everything else would sort itself out. And it's like, no, once you kind of have a taste of having an awakening experience, or whatever it is, you realise now the work has begun. And that's not to say that you can't do the work beforehand, because there's an awful lot of work that I had to do in order to have the insights I've had, which ultimately, I'll be honest, may turn out to be completely and utterly false, or misapprehensions. The nature of awakening, or these type of things, doesn't seem to be universal in how it affects people. In that, there's a book called Enlightenment Now, and people have all these awakening experiences and draw massively different conclusions out of it. Atheists become, theists become atheists. Doesn't change some people. It fundamentally changes people, where they know there's definitely life after death. Other people have awakening experience and they definitely know there's no life after death. And I think that was kind of what the nature of my visitation from divinity was saying, that the truth, it's true for now. It's not saying it's a lie. It's not going to be proved false, but it's not the whole truth. And so ultimately my kind of experience of all this might be wrong, bunny ears wrong, but it's also true for now, which is true enough. But all of the work you had to do to get there, to realise of all of the work I had to do. And if you do see awakening as the end goal, as my German teacher would used to say, you're in for a rude awakening. Literally, there you go, that's quite clever. Not clever, quite interesting. So a rude awakening if you have it as your goal. And certainly if you start making yourself special because of it. And I think one of the dangers, is come back to what I was saying at the beginning, of not talking about these things, is that it becomes a special thing. People fall for the trap of the chosen one, because if no one else is talking about these experiences, you think you're the only one having them, and so you must be special. But again, to reiterate what I said at the beginning, talking about them in the sense of, you can talk about them in a sense of being special too, so that you fall for the trap on both sides of the things. But there's so much not talking about it, and not enough talking about it to normalise it, to naturalise it, to make it okay, to make it a discussion that people are allowed to have a healthy discussion around. I've had some awakening without feeling embarrassed about it, without feeling like they're bragging. Even in this and me talking about it, I kind of feel like, well, this sounds like I'm bigging up myself or bragging, and that's because of the cultural or the indoctrination about you shouldn't talk about these things. Because if you talk about yourself having gained something or progressed in some way, that it's egotistical. And I'm trying my best not to come from an egotistical place, because I don't feel special because of this. I don't feel that I'm better than anyone else because of this. I don't feel I'm in a higher plane than anyone else, or any of these things that is purported, that word again, by people who espouse the dangers of talking about these things. I feel, if anything, humbled. I feel, if anything, more aware of the work that has to be done, more aware of what I have to do, more aware of this, I don't know, I was going to say sadness, it's not the right word. And there's something, ultimately, I think, more genuine about people who start in magic and are doing a sigil to find their lost love, to get their girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other back, or to pay the rent. There's something more honest than that, than this kind of quest, in a sense, for awakening or specialness or talking about that. It's I need this, I want this, I'm open to it. That I think in that kind of low magic, problematic words, low magic, high magic kind of regard, there can be something that's a bit more honest about it. Because I think in this kind of pursuit of awakening, we can forget about the problems of the world, because we start to see it as glamour or as an illusion, as something that isn't real and not my problem. And while it's not your fault, or not necessarily then tied to fix the world is your responsibility, you can fix your own life. And that spiritual bypassing thing of going, well, none of it's real, it's all illusion. I'm one with spirit, I'm an ascended master, I'm awakened, I'm enlightened, I don't have to deal with this. Is less honest than someone just doing a sigil going, I want to get laid. You know, there's something closer in that to the truth of things than the chase or the lust for specialness within awakening, or awakening as your goal. I don't think there's much else I really want to say in that. I'd like to have a discussion around it. I'd like to like what the thing the Baptist head back in the day was about. Can we talk about these things so that it's not that big of a deal, you know? And if we come from the place that awakening is possible, then people should be becoming awake. People should be having these experiences, and if they're not, why? You know. So let's open it up and talking about it, not talking about it. Your awakening experiences and how they've kind of situated you in your life. Does it feel like the world has changed in nature, or does it just feel that your orientation to the world has changed? Do you feel an awakening is more than just not being able to go back to sleep? What's your thoughts around all this? I'm very interested to hear. So yeah, there's always something I had know there's a section at one end of the awakening thing that I just can't remember to talk about, so maybe I'm not meant to talk about it. So good people of the internet, 20 minutes is long enough for me to be babbling by a babbling brook. Have a good week, and next week will be the divinations, the monthly divinations, and May your best days be ahead, and as always, be well, genuinely be well, from my heart to your heart.